All right, my renowned fans, welcome back to the Renowned Leadership Podcast. And I'm super excited to talk to you today, Claire, because I'm on this new kick, right? Of success. Uh, it seems like everywhere you go, you're being panhandled this instant success pill. Like you remember back in the day, like you had those instant weight loss pills, like the
Yes.
magic fat burning pills that never worked. Like now we've turned it into the instant success pill. And it's driving me absolutely nuts. And when I was going back through your bio and relearning about you again today, I was like, oh man, this lady gets it, because you didn't take the instant road. Like it's been 25 years in the making.
Yeah,
Longer.
going on 30. Yeah, going on
Yeah.
30. An overnight success that took 30 years. Yeah,
Right.
exactly right.
Yes. I love how you say that. An overnight
It's-
success that took 30 years. So what was the beginning of your road like? Well, what did all of that feel like in the very beginning?
Yeah, I can already tell we're going to click because as you can tell, I am as repelled as you by this notion of instant gratification and this one magic bullet or magic pill that is going to just launch your business or your entrepreneurial road into superstardom. For people like us, we know that just is not the case. So I've been in the game for about 30 years, but I started out in corporate. After, by the way, swearing after I finished college, I was never going to work in corporate America. That wasn't really my frame of reference growing up. My parents were not, big corporate. My dad was a small business owner. My mom was a school teacher. And so I wasn't groomed for that expectation or even that desire. But that's where the opportunities were. And I spent about 20 years in corporate America, started out in communications, did some marketing, did a turn in customer relations, snuck into human resources through the side door. So there was this opening to head up the training department. And I thought, all right, I'll give that a shot. After also swearing I was never going to work in HR. So I had to stop, I had to learn the hard way to stop saying never. Right. And so, I was in corporate. I was working crazy hours. I was traveling all the time, going 150 miles an hour. And one day back in 2011, I got diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm good now. I'm totally cancer free now. So, that's not how this story ends, at least not this chapter. But the gift that diagnosis gave me was that it forced me to go from 150 miles an hour to zero, to take a month off, to take, surgery, recover from that. I didn't even check email for the first 3 weeks that I was off, which was just unheard of.
Wait, what?
Right? I mean, like, just think about it. Like, I had a great team. I literally had to delegate everything. I completely trusted that they would keep the wheels not just rolling, but moving forward according to our plan. So I never had to worry about that. I was very fortunate. But in that silence, while I was healing, I finally couldn't outrun that voice in my head. That voice that had been trying to ask me for years, are you doing what you're passionate about? And so the gift that it gave me was this gift of, yes, healing, but also it put my priorities in very stark relief. And it woke me up to the fact that while I enjoyed what I was doing and I enjoyed the company and I loved the people that I worked with, I was not playing full out. I was not on the road where I was really feeding my passion. And so I got better. I went back to work, had a long, candid conversation with my boss and kind of negotiated my release. So I went back to work in like July. I didn't leave until mid October. And you would think I spent those months kind of
Of the
building
same
a
year?
plan. Same year, all
Oh
2011.
wow. So just
Yeah.
a few months. Like
Yeah. Like
you
I took
didn't.
a month off work. I came back. I was like, I don't know where I want to go next. I just know I can't stay here. My biggest fear was that I was going to blink and it was going to be 10 years down the road and I would have missed my shot. And so I didn't, and I took the leap and I didn't have a plan. I didn't have clients lined up. I didn't even know what my niche was going to be as a consultant. I just knew it was a road I had to travel.
Uh, dude, like, I, so you touched on another big talking point of mine recently is purpose. And you call it passion, purpose. I use them interchangeably. And so many people are stuck in a job that, like you, they're good at, they're successful, quote unquote, by the world standard, they're successful, but they're absolutely freaking miserable because they're not pursuing their passion or their purpose. They're not doing what they're meant to be doing. And that was after I left the military, I went to corporate America. And when I was leaving the military, they're like, you should think about being an entrepreneur. Yeah, that's never going to happen. Like, I don't want that stress. I don't want that responsibility. I've been getting shot at for the past 16 years. I'm good with stress and responsibility. And I got into the corporate world and I'm like, no, this ain't for me either. And lo and behold, being an entrepreneur is what was for me. But that 3.5 years, I was so miserable. And looking back, I understand now it was because I had no purpose. In the military, I always had my purpose.
Yeah.
And then when I went to the corporate world, I completely lost my purpose. And then when I started my own company, when I started Renowned, I now have my purpose again, and now I'm happy again, and now I'm healthy again. And I'm excited about every single day again because I have my purpose. So I love that you brought that up because that is such an important piece that you just kind of glazed over.
And it's a differentiator, right? Like you talk about corporate, and I think one of the reasons, first of all, before I even go forward, thank you wholeheartedly for your service. I am married to a Marine Corps veteran, and I know the sacrifice and the service. I don't deeply understand the experience he had or that you had, but I am so reverent in the presence of military veterans because it's a commitment not a lot of people make. And so thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's interesting because you touched on purpose, and I know for me, a lot of companies do pursue candidates who have come out of the military for the very reason that it is your lifeblood, this sense of purpose, this sense of mission. And I think where a lot of corporations get that wrong is they say, we're going to hire veterans because they're so mission oriented and that's what we need to drive the company forward. And it's the same types of corporations who hire people and advertise for people with entrepreneurial spirit. And the very first thing they do with a military veteran like you, who is mission driven, or a person who is also like you, who has entrepreneurial spirit, is they promise that this is going to be a place where you can bring your full authentic self. And then they expect conformity.
Yep, crush
They
it.
go, well, we want entrepreneurial spirit. And then the first time you walk in a different way, they go, not like that, we don't. Right. And so there's this, and so purpose has become a super big differentiator, I have found, in organizations that get it and are actually building for the long haul, and organizations that are still living in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see it too, because there's actually a guy I just talked to on my podcast that came out a couple of weeks ago, named Glenn Gardone, who is the president of the US based Red Chocolate. Great guy. He gets it. And what the way you describe is exactly his leadership style of he encourages every single person on his team to think, go outside the box, to push boundaries. Yes, you're going to make mistakes. Yes, you're going to screw up. We'll mitigate it as much as we can and address what we can. But that's how he encourages. And I'm like, man, where were you when I left the army? Like, seriously, like I needed a place like that because you're absolutely right. A lot of people think military is we're robots and we're trained not to think. It's actually the exact opposite. We're trained to think very quickly and to think very much on our own, operating within a specific mission set. Yes, but when bullets are coming at your face, you got a millisecond to make a decision, and usually that decision is life and death. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I love how your story just elevates, like it just proves the point that you have to be living in order to have that fulfilled life that everyone wants, that everyone can be proud of, and can look back and be like, yeah, yeah, in my life I made mistakes, but I have no regrets. Like that, your story is how you get there. It's by identifying your purpose or your passion and going and doing it. And I promise the second you start chasing that dream, it's going to be amazing. And the struggle, I think, and I'd like if you would talk about this, is the world sells us in order to be successful, you have to have a house, you have to have cars, you have to live in a penthouse in Manhattan or whatever the case may be. But for me, that's not success. That is not my definition of success at all. Yes, I want to pay my bills. I want to have nice things, sure, but success is my network. Success is the influence I have for me. Your success may be completely opposite. My mom's success was her children, her family. That
Yeah.
was my mom's success. So, I mean, first you have to identify your purpose and then identify what your success is and completely tune out the world and what it says you need to do. Because I
Yeah.
promise happiness is not within that realm. How many movie stars do you see that are really happy? All that success and money, how many of them look truly happy?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's so, oh my gosh, I love that you went there because it's so, you're right. Like they're selling the lifestyle and they're selling the magic pill. Again, back to your earlier point. You buy this pill, you take this medicine, you buy my course or my program, and overnight you can lean up against the fancy sports car that's pulling up to this, the 6-car garage and the big house on the beach. And I think that's where leaders in corporate America fall victim to that as well, because they aspire to leadership. Some of them, not everybody, but the wrong ones aspire to leadership for the trappings it brings them.
Mm-hmm.
And I know too many so-called leaders, and I'll use air quotes there, who wanted to become leaders for the power, for the corner office, for the comfy chair, for the executive parking spot, for all the perks. And the reason that doesn't work, and the reason people are answering that with their feet and going to the exits and going into organizational cultures that actually respect them, is because we see through the BS. We see through that veil, and we see through the leaders who just think that leadership is a role that they play versus a duty that they are honored to achieve and to fulfill. And
Yeah,
that's another
absolutely.
differentiator, right? Those who are, you underscored purpose. Those who are purpose driven about something bigger than themselves are the ones that differentiate, and they're the ones who are leading the building and the nurturing and the sustaining of better cultures that are attracting the right people to help them build something greater.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things I teach is, a leader's number one job is to take the bullet for the team. When the team gets shot at, the leader is front and center, taking as many of the bullets as he can or she can. That's your number one job. Protect your team. It's not about the glory. It's not, if you're, in my opinion, if you're a good leader, you're not even getting any of the glory because you're too busy passing the buck off to your team. You're taking all the criticism, all the hate, and all the bullets. You're too busy being a bullet sponge to do anything. And it's heartbreaking for me to see these, as air quote, leaders who don't get that, because what they end up producing is a very toxic environment with, because they're in such a me, look out for only me mindset, that's the mindset that, because the team is going to take on the mindset of their leader. And so if the leader is
Absolutely.
100% me focused, me mindset, that's how your team's going to be. And that just creates such a toxic environment where everyone's getting thrown under the bus, and you don't learn anything, you don't grow in any way. In fact, in some cases, in the worst cases, you're actually going backwards rather than forwards as far as career progression, career growth, and stuff like that goes. it's heartbreaking. It kills me. I hate seeing it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and it's, it's interesting because culture is the foundation of an organization. And culture, a lot of people hear that word, and they just think of positive culture, but there's a culture whether you are building it and whether you are intentionally nurturing it or not. And there is a huge difference between a culture of accountability, which is what you are kind of challenging leaders in what you just said to be more like, right? That they're going to own the failures and they're going to shield their team from the bullets and they're going to walk the walk, and lead by example by accepting accountability, not deflecting blame. And that's the kind of culture that grows companies. And that's the kind of culture that attracts the right people versus the toxic culture that you talk about, right? That you just spoke of, where there's a culture of that can be very corrosive, that can actually eat away at your organization from the inside out. And it's not when you have one toxic leader, it's when you have more than one, right? Because if you have one toxic leader, but your culture is strong, you're going to either performance manage them to get on the right road, or you're going to exit them because your culture is so personal to you. And because you are so passionate about building a culture that attracts the right people toward the right mission. But it's when you have multiple leaders and it's not just tolerated, but that's what gets rewarded. That's what gets advanced. Like you said, your leaders infect your team positively or negatively. I firmly, deeply believe that the biggest impact on the culture of a company is the behavior of its leaders. Leaders shape culture, it doesn't bubble up from the bottom. It doesn't organically grow based on the vibe of employees. It is dictated by the leaders at the top. So
I love you bring
if the
that up.
culture is not what you want it to be, you gotta check yourself at the executive level, not at the individual
Absolutely.
contributor level.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny that you brought that up because I won't name the company, but there's a well-known company that provides, all these perks, all the free food and beanbag chair lounge in and all this crazy stuff for its employees. And it's rumored, I would say, to be one of the most toxic work environments in the country. And it's like, how does it get that way then? Like, did it just grow too fast? Did they just ignore the toxicity? Were they rewarding productivity over positive growth? When I say positive growth, I mean positive team growth. I mean, well, how does that happen? And for these large companies, how do they fix it once they've gotten to the point to where they're considered one of the most toxic places to work? How do you fix that?
I mean, they certainly have a decision to make, right? They have to decide whether they have built themselves up to be so big that they've convinced themselves that they're too big to fail. And therefore, they're not going to do anything to course correct that culture. These are the same types of toxic leadership behaviors that believe that people are interchangeable, that
Mm-hmm.
human capital is an inexhaustible asset. And nothing could be further from the truth. We are living in a time when the job candidates are, talent is dictating decisions in the company because there seems to be a shortage. I can remember 20 years ago, we were talking about the upcoming war for talent. And, I was still in corporate at the time. We need to be prepared. We need to get out in front. We need to find better ways to, brand ourselves as an employer of choice. And while that was important, what was missing was your employer brand has to be in alignment with what your culture actually delivers. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
promise, again, that a military veteran can come in and really channel their purpose-driven mantra and mindset and really find a home here, or if you promise on the front end that we'll take entrepreneurial spirit and you can use this environment as an incubator for your ideas, but we're actually going to slap you for coloring outside of the lines. If we don't work on culture first, and that's not in alignment with our employer, value proposition, these cultures are going to corrode the company that you are hinting at. One of the ways that they get so big, and I suspect I know which one it is, but there's, I mean, pick one. There's many that we can talk about. a lot of times they are built and they are launched and they are amplified in a very short period of time because they are the vision of a very charismatic, incredibly smart leader who has this vision for the future that no one else has even come up with, and beyond that has a plan to make that vision a reality. And that can be very compelling. But the mistake that those companies tend to make is they've got this really visionary, figurehead at the top, and they saddled that same person with interacting with the people trying to fulfill the vision. And they're not necessarily always the same skill set. You've got these visionary, people that are so brilliant and so, we're not going to take no for an answer, and we're going to colonize Mars as an example, or we're going to build cars that can fly, or whatever that vision might be. That's fine. You've got to be self-aware enough, and your entire leadership team has to be aware enough that that visionary leader may not be the right person to talk to employees, may actually have to be kept in their own thought bubble and keep, envisioning and pushing the envelope and challenging the vision and the practicality of getting there, but should not be allowed to talk to people. And I've seen that too many times. So I think, to answer your question, to play that out, I think either they're going to get lucky and find that they can keep replenishing their own talent pool because they have a magnetic enough mission and vision that they're not going to run out of talent to try to put their shoulder to the wheel, or more likely they're going to implode.
Don't think as soon as you started saying that, I knew where you were going, and I started trying to think, and I cannot think of a time off the top of my head, at least, I'd have to do research, that a company actually got lucky. They may survive, but I mean, look at the auto industry. Look what it did to Detroit. And I'm not saying that all of that was toxic leadership, but I mean, it was bad leadership, it was poor, definitely poor management, poor resource management. And I mean, I just can't. Can you think of a time when a company's gotten lucky? I can't think of one.
Not over a long term. Not over long term. Some of these companies get lucky in short bursts of time, but that luck does run out. When you read books like Good to Great, Jim Collins, and he kind of talked about, his whole thought leadership in that book was around, what is that differentiator? I know that kind of keeps coming up as a theme here, but what's the differentiator between successful companies and companies that continue to perform and sustain after the CEO has left? And that's a big differentiator. And fast forward to today, because he wrote that book years ago, the average tenure of a CEO in corporate America is 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. Then they move on. We don't have the era where you have the same CEO for 30 years. And so that CEO walks in with a certain level of urgency around what they feel they need to do to make an impact through the mission and through the talent in their organization. And there's a short leash, right? Because even for those 3 to 4 years that they might be leading the company, if they haven't made a tangible return on the investment that the board or the shareholders have made in them, they're going to be gone in 18 months.
Yeah.
So, that tends to exacerbate toxicity that is already lying beneath the surface. And if there's not a good handover from one CEO to the next, or one leadership team to the next, and there isn't a talent pipeline where you're growing and nourishing that talent within in the right way, then that finding from Jim Collins about what translates from good to great is going to go the way of the dodo, as the saying goes, right? Because they are such short tenured leaders now. And it's like, how do I go in? How do I make an impact? How do I move the needle? But how do I do it in a way where I can front load the return? Because if I haven't started to make a noticeable difference within 18 months, I'm gone.
Right.
It doesn't really set us up for longevity, right? And it doesn't set up employees who are looking for a little bit of stability to know who to follow if every 3 years or maybe 36 months, the winds change.
Right. And there's nothing more annoying as an employee whenever it's like, hey, new corporate mandate. And like, man, we just did this. Like, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It's so irritating. And that's one of the biggest things I try to get leaders to understand is your employees, like they have many concerns, yes. But in all my research and all the talking I've done, it has a common theme. They want to feel safe. They want to know that they can go to work. And I'm not just talking about physical safety. They
Yeah.
want intellectual safety. They want to be in a safe place where they can express themselves. They want emotional safety to where they don't have to go to work and play office politics. Now I understand office, part of that's normal,
Yeah.
but a good leader is going to be able to head that off and mitigate most of it. So I mean, people just want to feel safe when they go to work, and I feel like in today's corporate culture, we're forgetting that the number one cardinal rule of anyone is they need to feel safe in order to perform.
Yeah.
People like me who can operate in very hostile environments, we're few and far between. That's like why we're less than the 1% of the population.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, the average person craves safety. They need that net. So I mean, when you're not facilitating a good, safe work environment for your base employees to operate in, you're kind of just dooming your culture from the very beginning.
And it's so interesting because that is such a basic human need to feel safe that evolution has not beaten out of us. Right. I mean,
Right.
it started when we were whatever we were prior to being humans who walked upright. Right. We always, there's this survival instinct that has to be met first. There is this fundamental need to feel safe before we are going to crack out of our crusty shell and truly show our human form, our true selves, our true personality, our unique walk. And companies that overlook that, companies that undervalue culture and skip over creating an environment where people feel safe. And I think it's really important that you went there, because some people are going to hear that and say, so what, do we have to have like safe spaces and quiet rooms where people can like feel sheltered? That's not what we mean by safety.
Mm.
Safety is freedom. Safety is freedom to come in and be exactly who I am and believe what I believe and share ideas in their freest form and not be judged or slapped for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got lit up on LinkedIn a while back because I was talking about how leaders need to be vulnerable, right? We need to be the ones that set the example and say, you know what? I made a bad decision. I'm sorry. Or, you accept responsibility, you accept the blame, you're open about your shortcomings, right? Now, I understand that is a fine line one walks. Like you're not going to work and airing out every single pair of dirty underwear you have. But when it's plainly visible, you're very open, you're very honest, you're very transparent about it. And everyone, like I had like maybe three people agree with me, and everyone else is like, dude, like that's not happening where I work
Yeah,
because we will get crucified. And it's like, then you need to go find a new place to work, homie, because you're in a very toxic environment. And leaders need the exact same. Like, yes, we're expected to operate in a less safe environment, but even a leader still needs to be in a place where you're safe to make those mistakes, because that's the only way you grow. I've made a lot of mistakes in my military career, horrible mistakes that got people hurt. And I'm not thankful or I'm not happy that I made those mistakes, but I can tell you the most growth I've had in my life came from those mistakes, because it's like
absolutely.
I'm never letting that happen again. I'm never rushing to that decision again, or whatever the case was. The most growth came from the most pain, right? You have to be in a place where you can openly and just embrace that so that you can learn. Otherwise, you're going to end up just being, like you said, a shell.
Yeah.
And last I checked, shells don't get much done.
And it is so important. So there's so much to unpack in all that you just said, and you started with vulnerability. Leaders who look at vulnerability as a weakness are missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
Your employees know that you're human, and therefore that you're flawed, and therefore that you're not perfect, and therefore that you make mistakes. And the differentiated leader is the one who acknowledges their humanity, acknowledges the fact that they don't have all the answers. It's the whole reason they have a team. It's the whole reason you have a team. You're not supposed to have all the answers, right?
It's okay to say, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think companies really need to get much better, much more rigorous, much more self-disciplined about failing forward.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something where the brand promise and the brand delivery don't line up in most organizations, because leaders will say, I welcome ideas. Innovation is how we're going to break through, and that's how we're going to move forward and gain market share and competitive edge and all of that. But the first time an idea falls flat or costs money, and I realize these are mostly for-profit businesses, and I realize that you're not going to stay in business long if you lose money. But there are short-term back steps that you might need to take. There has to be a rigor and a commitment to failing forward. As you said, you learn much more and you grow much faster from your mistakes and from learning from them and from owning them. And a leader has a decision to make when there's a mistake. They can either own it or they can be defensive and deflect blame. And which company, back to one of your earlier questions, which company do you think actually grows for the long haul? The one that slaps people because they make a blunder, or the one who says, let's get the team together and let's learn from this, because this is our opportunity to grow?
Oh yeah, so many opportunities, because whenever the leader is transparent, it does have that freedom, and he goes to his team like, look guys, and I can't remember who it was. I had a guest who, I'm going to share her story, and I apologize. I will find out who it was and put it in the show notes. But she was sharing a mistake she had made. And it was just something, she had a lot on her mind. It was an oversight. It was stupid. It was simple, but it ended up being huge. So she went to her team and was like, hey guys, I did this. Yeah. And they're like, oh my God, seriously? And she's like, yeah. And they rallied around her and solved the problem. No loss in profit, no major client issues, some minor stuff, but nothing major. And the problem got resolved. If you don't have that freedom, and the leader's just like, hey, this isn't my fault, this is Sherry over here's fault, then that is when, that's when the company takes the biggest hit, because the team isn't going to rally around their leader. They don't have that loyalty to their leader.